In the rap industry, there aren't many examples of artists with billions of streams and views suddenly disappearing from the radar, but you all know one such example, Lil Pump. However, it is not entirely accurate to say that Gazi Garcia has completely disappeared from the media agenda. He still stirs up the internet with his antics and releases new music and videos. There's no need to talk about billions anymore. Lil Pump often manages to reach only 2 or 3 million views. His last hope was the album Lil Pump 2, which he announced as the most important release of his career. It was indeed his last chance to prove that Garcia can still top the charts. However, it seems that the album did not receive the attention the rapper had hoped for. Why? Let's try to figure it out. Each period has its own musical phenomena, and if you think about what is associated with the second half of the 2010s, it would undoubtedly be SoundCloud. This cloud-based platform has given us many top-tier performers, many of whom can legitimately be called voices of a generation. Some talked about anger and rage, some about mental problems, some about social conflicts, and some even reinvented the sound of an entire genre. Among all of them, Lil Pump was responsible for youthful audacity and straightforwardness. When his first hits spread across youth playlists in different corners of the planet, Pump himself was not even 18. For example, his arguably biggest career track, the 5-time platinum Gucci Gang, was released by 17-year-old Pump in 2017.
Gucci gang, Gucci gang, Gucci gang, Gucci gang, Gucci gang, Gucci gang, Gucci gang.
There, you won't find intricate lyrics or a hard flow, but there is an incredibly catchy chorus and minimalist production, which by that time had become the main and recognizable feature of Pump's music. The overall feeling was that the guy didn't particularly try hard on the material, but he still came out with hits one after another, which added even some rock and roll personality to his image. The vibe of an impudent teenage devil initially made up for the poor quality of his releases, and he was even forgiven for some really unsuccessful ones. But over time, more and more of this kind of material appeared. After a star-studded start, which included a collaboration with Kanye,
Like a lighter, bitch, we ignorant. All this water on my neck look like I fell when
Pump tried to solidify his success by releasing singles, appearing on joint projects with famous artists, announcing and cancelling world tours, and even managed to release an album and make as much noise as he could. But the concept of his uncomplicated, monotonous trap music quickly became tedious to his audience. The artist's popularity and media attention began to work against him, as each of his new hit songs was perceived by listeners as his last chance, and the rapper himself was spoken of as a lucky person who had accidentally hit the mark a couple of times. There were no new hits, but there were several beefs with representatives of the old school, flirtations with leaving music, and political statements that further annoyed the audience.
I come here to say, Mr. President, I appreciate everything you've done for our country. You brought the troops home, and you're doing the right thing. MAGA 2020. Don't forget that!
Music seemed to take a back seat, and Lil Pump quickly turned into something between a media freak and a rapper who was not interesting from a creative point of view to many. In just a couple of years, he managed to transform from a multi-platinum artist to someone who records collaborations with Russian rapper Morgenstern, and whose album doesn't even make the Billboard 200 in its first week of sales. It became clear that his creativity needed rethinking, something new. Otherwise, Lil Pump seriously risked ending up on the sidelines of the music industry and remaining in people's memory as a bright but one-time flash from 2017. Lil Pump took a creative break. During this break, he was busy not only with music. For example, he decided to open his own OnlyFans account, where he filmed videos with various women. The name was Pump Playhouse, which hinted at the content that would be inside. After the break, in the spring of 2022, he announced a new album with a refreshed sound, which would be aimed at getting him out of the crisis, and released the first single All the Sudden.
AR-15, that bitch came with a drum kit. She wanna fuck me just because I got,
which, to be honest, was not particularly different from his previous work, but the audience chose to believe the artist's words and generated excitement around the upcoming album. Moreover, the name was fitting for a reincarnation, Lil Pump 2. The release took place only a year later, in March 2023, and by that time, Pump had managed to build up incredibly high expectations in his listeners, constantly fueling interest with snippets on social media and promising something extremely interesting. The album really features a plethora of experiments and styles that we haven't heard from Pump before. For example, No Hook, which is a kind of freestyle track with a decent Michigan-style beat that works well for both the artist and guest Rio de Young Og.
You ever see two pregnant bitches in a fist fight? Huh? Baby mama number 1 and number 2. Whoever went.
Although the artists lack chemistry between them, they both sound interesting. It's worth noting the single Pull Up, on the steady beat in the style of Playboi Carti. Pump sounds quite organic, and the track becomes one of the positive highlights of the album.
I took too much Molly, swerving in a Rari. I can't feel my body.
The main problem with the release was surprisingly the two bold experiments that for some reason one wants to talk about more after listening than about something good. It should be acknowledged that practically nothing radically new on this album worked. For example, She Know with Ty Dolla $ign and I Don't Mind with Young Boy Never Broke Again.
I don't mind being all alone. I don't
Both of these tracks are primarily Lil Pump's attempts to make R&B style songs, but they don't work properly. Firstly, because the beats themselves seem to not quite fit the artist and his delivery style, and secondly, because it seems like he just doesn't know how to sing well enough to make it all sound worthy, considering that in half of the cases his vocals were left without autotune for some reason, and that Ty Dolla $ign and YoungBoy sound much more appropriate and better suited to these songs.
Baby, you savage, you know I gotta make her mine. When I pull out the foreign, she right by me.
In addition to that, there is a notoriously bad track here called Pump Rock Heavy Metal.
Pump rock shit, yeah. Slit my wrist, slit, fuck that bitch.
Essentially, it is an attempt by Pump to jump on what seems like an already departed hype train and make a song in the style of trap metal, the result of which is something absolutely insane. The absurd and ridiculous lyrics on top of mediocre instrumentation make this track terrible. Pump himself seems to be giving it his all in performance, but it doesn't save the overall picture. This track is probably one of the funniest songs that came out this year. In addition to that, there are tracks with horribly ear-piercing beats like Swipe and Mosh Pit, which primarily just make loud noise or squeak and only secondarily serve as instrumental in the track.
Mosh pit, jump in the shit and get dropped. Oh shit, went to my.
The essence of the album's failure is in things like this. There is much more unsuccessful than successful here, and the majority of the tracklist consists of boring trap representations straight from 2016 that everyone has gotten tired of more than once. The desire to experiment is commendable, but it seems that Pump lacked the desire, team, and perhaps talent to properly execute these experiments. He needed a loud comeback, and in a sense he got it. The disappointment of fans from unjustified hopes and long waiting echoed in the first days after the release, and then sharply faded away, as if this release never happened because there is nothing that can be discussed for long. The album came out trying to break free from trends, shooting and bursting with various musical effects like fireworks, but still having nothing more or less coherent behind them, and perhaps it closes the window of opportunity for a comeback forever.
Butterfly doors go up on a Tesla. Send that bitch back in the Greyhound. She's.
And that's all for today. What do you think? Can Lil Pump hype up at least once more? Write your opinion in the comments, like and subscribe to the channel. Bye for now.